Be seated.
Yes, Your Honor.
Is ready?
Yes, sir.
You may call your name.
Your Honor, just as a preliminary matter, we did talk about an exhibit yesterday during the testimony of Mr. Bright. We have now marked that exhibit as plaintiff's exhibit 95, and would like to offer it as
Objection to 95.
no.
And that document is, can you tell me what that is?
These are some notes of a telephone conference between Mr. Bright and Rob Hoskins. The date on them is October 9th, 2000.
Thank you. All right, anything else we need to say before we call you?
No, Your Honor.
All right, that will be.
At this time, we will call Michael Cunningham.
Come forward. Before.
Please, sir. I can ask you to raise your right hand. You solemnly swear or affirm testimony you give the court today in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If you would take the witness stand, please, sir, and state your name and spell your last name for the record, please.
My name is Michael Cunningham. Cunningham, C-U-N-N-I-N-G-H-A-M.
Good morning, Mr. Cunningham.
Good morning.
My name is Troy Tessier. As you probably know, and we represent Anderson County in a case involving Mr. Preston. Where do you currently live?
Anderson,
And how long have you lived in Anderson?
since 1997.
What do you do for a living?
I work for AMN Health.
And you went to college at Clemson?
Yes, sir.
Did you start working for Anderson County while you were in college?
No, sir.
When did you start working for Anderson County?
January of 1998.
And didn't you work with Anderson County prior to that as an intern?
No, sir.
Okay. Not during college at all?
No, sir. I work for Greenville County.
I got you.
Yes, sir.
Were you the assistant county administrator for Anderson County for a period of time?
Yes, sir.
And about what time period?
Perhaps roughly 2002 forward.
Okay, and at some point were you then promoted to deputy county administrator?
Yes, sir.
And when was that approximately?
Perhaps 2006.
Can you describe, generally speaking, what are the differences are in responsibilities for an assistant county administrator and a deputy county administrator?
Assistant county administrator, I think I have more direct departmental responsibility than as deputy county administrator. We had levels, division directors, which would then kind of direct a report up to the deputy administrator, to the county administrator, and I served as the county administrator whenever our current county administrator was not there. So I think it was a bit higher level of administrative responsibility from the assistant to the deputy.
And as the deputy county administrator, are you the person next in line behind the county administrator in terms of the chain of command, so to speak?
Yes, sir.
And did you report directly to Joey Preston during the entire time you worked with Anderson County leading up to November of 2008?
Yes, sir.
We're going to talk to you a little bit about some of the things that happened in 2008, and I want to focus you, if I could, on October 2008. By October of 2008, did you know that there were discussions being held about the possibility of a severance agreement for Mr. Preston?
Not until late October.
Okay. And then at about that same time, in late October of 2008, did you know there were discussions going on about the possibility, at least, of hiring you to replace Mr. Preston as the county administrator?
Not until, again, late October.
And do you recall how you came to know that?
Yes, sir. I had a meeting with 3 of the members of County Council on or about October the 22nd, where this issue was discussed.
And do you remember the circumstances of the meeting in terms of, for example, where did you meet?
Yes, sir. We met in Greenwood, South Carolina, at a restaurant at Charlie's, I believe.
Okay. And present with you at the meeting were Gracie Floyd, Larry Greer, and Ron Wilson?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
And what did you discuss at the meeting?
Your Honor, hearsay?
He hasn't asked to quote anyway. He asked the subjects that were discussed.
Right.
Overruled that objection.
What was discussed at the meeting?
We discussed the possibility of me becoming the county administrator and the issue that that there was the potential for some type of severance agreement with Mr. Preston.
And was one of the things that was discussed whether or not you might be interested in taking the job as county administrator if Mr. Preston left that job.
Yes.
Did you talk at all about what the salary might look like if you were to take the job as county administrator?
Not at that time.
Did you have discussions with Mr. Greer at that point in time about how challenging the job would be if you were to take the job?
Your Honor, same objection. He is now specifically asking about discussions with an identified person.
Increasingly becoming more specific, I agree with the objection. This time I want to overrule it, unless he has some specific words.
And Your Honor, we're not offering to prove the truth of the matter, sir, as much as the impact on Mr.
I've overruled the
Thank you,
objection
sir.
at this point in time. I'm cautioning you about becoming too specific about who said what wins. I'm ruling in your favor.
Did the discussion include discussion about how difficult the job of county administrator might be if you were to take on that job?
Yes, sir. That was a part of the conversation.
And did you have an impression based on your experience in working with Anderson County up until that point, and you had been working there for several years, did you have an impression about how difficult the job might be if you were to take the job of serving as county administrator?
Yes.
What was your impression?
That it would be a challenge.
And why?
There had been for some time a very contentious relationship between some members of county council, and it was a difficult political environment, certainly, and so that I was aware of all of that.
After this meeting that you had at O'Charlie's in Greenwood, did you obtain a copy of Mr. Preston's existing employment agreement?
I did.
How did you get that?
I followed Mr. Greer to his home, and he had a copy of it, and he made a copy of that for me to take and look over.
And why did you do that? Why did you want a copy of Mr. Preston's existing contract?
I didn't have a copy of it, and if we were talking about employment, I wanted to see some document that set out terms for employment for a county administrator.
And would you agree with me, Mr. Cunningham, that you communicated with Mr. Preston about the possibility that you might be hired in his place?
I did.
And how did that happen? What type of communication did you have with Mr. Preston?
I spoke with him person to person about that. It was my desire not to have anything happen behind his back, or that he would be aware of all conversations that I had.
And what do you recall specifically about your communication with Mr. Preston about the possibility that you might end up taking over his job?
Only that, I hope that wouldn't be the case, but that I certainly would look at it absent of anything that happened to him, and that I would reach some conclusion about that I had not at that point done so.
And did you include it in the communications you had with Mr. Preston about this possibility that you might be asked to take over as county administrator? Did you discuss with him proposed changes you wanted to make in the employment agreement that you might sign if you did take over?
Leading here.
Leading is allowed to a certain degree, and I'm going to allow it in this case. Critical. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, I gave him what I thought I would like to see as changes in an employment contract.
And do you recall how you did that? I mean, was it a marked up copy or?
I believe I think I emailed that to him, just here's what I would see as changes in an employment contract.
And do you think that was a separate email where you outlined the changes, or did you also include the document itself with markup?
I think it was in a separate email.
And do you recall any of the particular changes you were mentioning to Mr. Preston that you would like to see?
I don't recall the specifics of what all those changes were at the time, other than I know that there was one related to the county vehicle.
Would it be fair to say, Mr. Cunningham, that in general terms, you used Mr. Preston's existing employment agreement as a guide for one that you might consider signing yourself?
Yes.
Did you later meet with anyone else from Anderson County about the possibility that you might take over as county administrator?
I had another meeting with those 3 members of county council.
Okay, which 3 members are you talking about?
That would be, 2 members at that time, Mr. Wilson and Mr. Greer.
And do you recall where that meeting was?
That was also in Greenwood, also at a restaurant, I believe Ruby Tuesdays, and that would have been in mid-November of 2008.
And would you agree that both of the meetings you've mentioned that were held in Greenwood were held before the November 18, 2008 county council meeting?
Yes.
What did you discuss at the second meeting, the one with Mr. Greer and Mr. Wilson?
That, again, I was not privy to what was happening with the negotiations with Mr. Preston, but should things proceed, that I would be willing to take on the responsibility as county administrator, and then we discussed salary.
And do you recall what you asked for in terms of an annual salary?
Yes.
What did you ask for?
$125,000.
Do you know, whether you knew it then or whether you know it now, do you know how that salary, $125,000 a year, compares with the salary that Mr. Preston was getting for the job of county administrator in 2008?
I believe that it was less than what he was getting as county administrator, but I did not know his exact salary amount.
Would it be fair to say that you were willing to take on the job of county administrator if they asked you to do it at a rate of pay less than what Mr. Preston had been getting?
Yes.
Is that based in part on the fact that you had less experience at that point in time?
I think, yes, that was a part of it, as well as just it was what I deemed to be a fair starting salary.
Would you agree with me, Mr. Cunningham, that you did not ask for any type of a premium in terms of your annual salary in order to deal with the difficult political environment that you knew you would be stepping into?
No, sir.
You would not agree with that?
No, I'm sorry. That is an accurate statement, and no, I did not ask for a premium.
When did you know, if at all, that a vote would happen at the November 18, 2008 County Council meeting that would include a consideration of hiring you as county administrator?
Probably November the 17th.
Do you remember how you came to know that?
I think it was a conversation with Mr. Preston, just regarding the fact that there had been no resolution to his particular issue. I had a contract in hand that should that move forward, that I would be willing to consider. And I think during that time frame, he said, well, you know, this is something that will come up.
And do you know whether or not Mr. Preston had any involvement in the actual drafting of the employment agreement that you ended up signing?
No, I don't know if he had any actual involvement. I sent it to him, and then I don't know exactly who drafted the actual document. My assumption is that the county attorney.
And did you get the final version of the proposed contract that you had on November 17th, it sounds like? Did you get that from Mr. Preston?
I did.
Let me ask you some questions about Michael Thompson. You agree with me, do you not, that Michael Thompson was the chair of county council in 2008?
Yes, sir.
Did you have any understanding as to whether or not Mr. Thompson was seeking or actually sought employment with the county beyond his service as county councilman during 2008?
Not until mid-November 2008. That was a desire of his.
And how did you come to learn in mid-November 2008 that Mr. Thompson was looking for a job from Anderson County?
It was a conversation with Mr. Preston regarding that issue.
And what do you remember about that conversation?
Just that Mr. Preston mentioned that Mr. Thompson was indeed looking for employment beyond his term on county council, possibly with the county, and that he had concerns about a number of issues, but mainly about the health of his wife and their economic viability, and that he was indeed seeking employment with the county.
Did you have any conversation with Mr. Preston about whether or not it would be appropriate for the county to hire Mr. Thompson under the circumstances?
We did.
And what do you remember about that conversation?
I told him that I had concerns about hiring Mr. Thompson as a county employee.
And why did you have concerns about hiring Mr. Thompson as a county employee in November 2008?
And it goes back to the contentious political environment that existed at the county at the time, and it was my opinion that would not help resolve any of those issues.
And did Mr. Thompson come to see you at some point after the November 18, 2008 county council meeting to ask you to hire him for a job?
He did come and ask me about the possibility of employment with the county.
And was that after November 18, 2008?
It was.
Do you remember what job he was asking you to hire him into?
I don't recall what specific job that he was asking to be hired into, only that he was hoping for employment.
And did you actually hire Mr. Thompson at that point?
I did not.
What did you tell him, if anything?
I told him that I would certainly consider something like that, but I shared with him my real concerns about him being employed by the county, how I didn't think that would be a benefit for the county and not for him personally.
And at the time that Mr. Thompson came to see you about a job, was he also coming to see you as county council chairman to have you execute your master employment agreement as the new county administrator?
No, I don't believe those were at the same time.
Did Mr. Thompson, is he the one who brought you your master employment agreement to sign?
I don't recall who brought that agreement to me directly, but certainly in his capacity as chairman, he would have been involved in that process. But I don't recall him hand delivering it to me.
Do you agree with me, and I'll show it to you if I need to, I'm just wondering if you remember, but your employment agreement with the county dated November 19, 2008 is signed by you and Mr. Thompson and Mr. Mack.
I have not seen the document that you referred to, but I'm sure that.
Okay. Yeah, I probably should.
Yes. At this point, I'll remind the attorneys that we're still under the sequestration order. If there's any witnesses present, I don't know if there are any, they need to step out. That continues throughout the trial. I didn't mention it before we started.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, that's fine. Yes, you may approach.
Cunningham, I'm going to try to do this without falling down like I did yesterday. This is exhibit number 9. It's already been admitted. And just to refresh your memory, but do you agree that that's a copy of the contract you signed on or about 19 November 2008?
Yes, sir.
And does it have your signature, Michael Thompson's signature, and Mr. McAbee's signature on the final page?
Yes, sir.
You don't remember looking at this document how you received it in terms of when it was brought to you for signature?
That's correct.
Was one of the reasons why you thought it would be not in the best interest of the county to hire Mr. Thompson, the fact that you believed it would be a conflict of interest for Mr. Thompson to seek employment after he had voted on your contract?
Your Honor, I appreciate the court's willingness to have some pleading, but there should be some sort of...
I'll sustain the objection at this time.
Can you tell me any other reasons why you were concerned about hiring Mr. Thompson for county employment?
Again, it was clearly as a result of the political environment at the time. That my goal was hopefully to serve as a bridge kind of from where we were to where I hope we could get to as a county, and that I saw that as a possible obstacle to that. And again, I didn't feel like it was in his best interest or was in the best interest of the county.
And are you aware of the ethical rules that apply to conflicts of interest in Anderson County?
I'm not.
As a general matter?
As a general matter, I'm aware of certain conflicts of interest that could be there, but my understanding for Mr. Thompson is that he was seeking employment when his relationship as a county council person with the county would have concluded.
Do you know what happened after you told Mr. Thompson that you would not hire him into a county job with respect to Mr. Thompson?
Do I know what happened to him? Or?
Yeah, in other words, after you told Mr. Thompson that you would not hire him, is that
Right.
fair? After you told him you would not hire him, do you know what he did with respect to county employment?
Oh, I do not.
Do you know whether or not he went to see Mr. Preston to try to get hired for a job?
No, I do not know that for sure.
At the time, would you agree with me that as of December 1st, 2008, you were the county administrator of Ramsey County?
That's correct.
So on or after December 1st, would you agree with me that Mr. Preston was no longer serving as county administrator?
That's correct.
So any decision to hire Mr. Thompson, if one were made, would you agree would have had to have been made by you if it was on or after December 1st?
Yes.
And did you ever become aware that Mr. Thompson had been hired to a county job?
No.
When you became county administrator on December 1st, 2008, did you become aware at some point in time that the county had a contract between itself and a company owned by Allison Shawn?
Yes.
Do you know who Allison Shawn is?
Yes, I do.
And did you know that she was the daughter of Ron Wilson?
Yes.
Did you know that at the time, that you learned that she had a contract with the county?
Yes.
Did the contract that Ms. Shawn's company had with the county include a buyout provision?
I did not know that the contract had buyout provision until probably early January of 2009, when that was brought to my attention by Mr. Daniels, I believe, who was the internal auditor that the county council had hired.
When you learned that Ms. Shawn's company's contract with the county had a buyout provision, did that surprise you?
Yes.
Do you know about let me ask this, do you know who Heather Jones is?
Yes.
Did you become aware at any time that there were certain documents in Heather Jones' file that were backdated?
No.
Did Mr. Preston ever talk to you about backdating any documents for Ms. Jones's personnel file?
We talked about a number of issues as related to economic development. The thing that stood out to me was an employment issue with a former county employee. That stood out. But there was a lot of conversations during that time. I don't recall one about backdating anything in Heather's file.
Well, let me ask you a different way then, Mr. Cunningham. If Mr. Preston were to ask you to approve backdating documents for Ms. Jones's file, or any employee's file, would that be troubling to you?
Your Honor,
Yes.
I object to the question to the extent that he's using the term backdating. I mean, it's clear in this case that what happened was they dated a document at the point in time of Jones's employment starting, and to the extent that he's asking the witness to comply, that there was some sort of, I object to the term in these.
I understand you object to the term, but he's questioning the witness, and you can certainly urge a different term later if you like.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. Just a couple more questions at most, Mr. Cunningham. If Mr. Preston had asked you to sign off on a document for Ms. Jones or any other employee of the county at the time you were county administrator, where the document was backdated, in other words, sign a document today, but it has a date a year ago, would you have done it?
I think I would have had trouble signing that type of document. I would have certainly wanted a lot more information about why it was necessary. I don't say that I wouldn't have, but it would be trouble.
And you don't recall any situation in which Mr. Preston talked to you about putting dates on any documents for personnel files that were dates prior to the date of the conversation you might have had?
I don't recall any of those conversations.
That's all I have. If you would answer Mr. Davis' questions.
Mr. Davis, your witness.